Good evening. My name is Evan Gregory, and this is Bible Answers. We're going to be studying on the topic of seriousness tonight. And as always, this is a live show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave that in the comment section. I'll respond to it. And we also have a YouTube page. It's North Columbus Church of Christ. And you can find all of our videos at that location as well. And so we finished up the book of Acts last week. And so uh, instead of looking through a book, I have decided that we're just going to look at a very specific topic very swiftly here. And again, we'll be looking at this topic of seriousness, and really in regards to seriousness towards God, or our life in general, our worship of God. And so we'll get straight up into the lesson here. And so sometimes, and I don't know if anybody, if many people watching this will, you know, be able to answer this question or know about somebody that's like this. But I've often, or well, I say often, a couple of times I've heard individuals being described as so serious that they were scary, and not that they were mean individuals, not that they would in any way harm anybody, but when it was time to get busy, when there was a job to get done, they were very, very serious about it, and so much so that people were just in a way intimidated by the way they acted. And so you think about that, and and I could think about several people that I could say, yep, maybe when I was younger or a kid, yep, that person, I was kind of intimidated by that person just because of how serious they are in certain situations in their life. And for a Christian, we have to be serious about many matters of our lives here today, and we have to be concerned about how we interact with others and with God. In Psalms 89 and verse 7, it says, God is greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints and to be held in reverence by all those around him. So the psalmist here is saying that God is to be feared, he's to be held in reverence. And below that, we see a couple of definitions for reverence. It says a feeling of attitude or deep respect tinged with awe. The outward manifestation of this feeling to pay reverence to. So this, again, you have this deep respect for something. You're showing it. You have this awe for some individual or some entity. But also we see this idea of being feared in the Psalms that we have here. And a lot of times, what you hear when people talk about fearing God, they will say, "Well, that just means reverence. That just means respect." But when we look at how that word is used in the Hebrew language, and this is a diagram of how that Hebrew word is used, what you see is that this word, when it says fear, it does mean fear. Most of the time here, we see in that blue. We see the pie chart that this blue that takes up mostly of that pie chart means to be fear or feared. The red, we see that as afraid. And so we have to be careful when we're looking at those instances that talks about describing God as fearing God. And what we see that Hebrew word is also used in multiple cases of actual people fearing others, being scared of others. And so what we have to understand and also when we understand who God is that at the end of the day, he controls, our eternal destination. That there has to be some deep concern, there has to be some fear. And this is just like a child's fear of their parents, that they know if that child messes up, they know that the parent is going to discipline them, and there's a little bit of fear there. And I think this is what the psalmist here is saying, that because of God, who he is, there ought to be just a little bit of fear, that we ought to respect, we ought to reverence him, but there is a little bit of fear there, and he is greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints. And so he is to be feared. He be acted in reverence towards. When we think about and continuing with the Old Testament, we think about the organization of the temple worship, and think about the condition of those that did the work in the temple. And what we see is that they were considered to be clean, or they had to be clean to go into the temple and to perform the work. Leviticus 21 talks about them being the priests, those that do the work in the temple. They were to be holy. So they were to be holy. They were to be cleansed. There was this process of cleansing which they were to take part in order to do certain aspects of the temple work. But also, it's not just the priests that were to be clean and holy, but also the rest of the people, the rest of the nation of Israel. Remember in Leviticus, the clean or the clean foods or the clean things that if they touched and dealt with, rather the unclean things in which they would touch or deal with, the individuals themselves would then be unclean, and they had to go through a process in order to be clean after that. And so they had to distinguish between the clean and unclean. They were also told to be holy as well. We see that in Leviticus 19, verse 2, that they were to be holy, separate people for the Lord. Okay, so again, there's differences in the work for the priests and the common people, but this common issue of being clean, of being holy towards the Lord, this was for everybody here. So they would be clean, they would be holy, they would be reverence toward the Lord. In Leviticus 10, I don't have the verse here, but the verse reference rather here, but in Leviticus chapter 10, we see a situation with Nadab and Abihu. They offer a strange fire to the Lord. And so what we see there, and if you go back and read this situation, is I don't think that Nadab and Abihu, they had just bad motivations. We see that it seems like they had good intentions towards what they're doing. But the problem there was they didn't do what God told them to do. Okay, they did something that came out of their own mind, that they thought they were good. And as you continue reading chapter 10, we see what the real issue with doing this, with offering this strange fire. We see this in this verse here. It says, "This is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I must be regarded as holy, and before all the people, I must be glorified." So you think about that for a minute. How what does it look like for an individual to regard God as holy? Is that just an emotional thing? Do I just feel a certain way, and that is them regarding God as holy? What we see is that there's something more here. And what is going on here is that the Lord is tying obedience to what he says to regarding him as holy. Okay. And so if they disobey him, they just, they're not concerned about what the Lord thinks. They're just doing their own thing. And by doing so, they don't regard the Lord as holy. They don't glorify the Lord. And so for us to fear the Lord, for us to be holy towards him, for us to be clean towards him, for us to reverence him, we have to make sure that we're also obedient towards the Lord as well. 1 Peter 1 and verse 15 through 17 gives us the same idea. It says, "But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on the Father, who is without partiality, judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear." So the Lord is holy. And so how should we be? We should also be holy in all of our conduct. And so for us to be holy in all of our conduct, we have to figure out what the standard is. And so the standard is, or that holy standard, is the standard of God. And so if we do those things that are pleasing in the sight of the Lord, we know that we're acting holy in all of our conduct. And also there's some motivation here in this passage, and the fact that God, he's without partiality going to judge us according to our works. And so that is, again, motivation for us to be holy. Conduct yourself throughout this time of your stay here in fear. Again, that aspect of fear there as well. And so it is of the utmost concern of the Christian to live holy lives, conduct ourselves here in fear. Make sure that we're upholding that standard that God has given us. And so, with that being said, and we looked at all those other verses, is there any work here on this earth while I'm alive that I should take lightly? Okay. Do I just go about life? If I'm a Christian, do I just go about life as just we just live and let live. We do what we want to do. We have no concern. We already got our ticket punched to heaven. Supposedly, a lot of people believe that, and so once we get our ticket punched to heaven, we're just coasting for the rest of our life. What we see in the Bible is something totally different. When you become a Christian, that's where the change starts. That's where the work starts for the Christian. We have to now uphold that standard of the Lord. So we have to take those things very seriously. Also, in Titus, in verses 2 through 8, we see here on the screen that Paul, writing to Titus, he gives an examples of how different, I guess you would say, people groups should act. And they're all very similar, but he talks to the older men, he talks to the older women, he talks to the young men and women as well. But notice what he says. And what we see here is that multiple times in this passage, he uses the term being sober, being reverent, and in the description of what they ought to be. It says that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith and love, in patience. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. Likewise, exhort the young men to be sober-minded, in all things showing yourselves to be a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say to you. So again, Paul demands that basically, everybody really to be sober minded, that they are to be reverent in their behavior. Again, paying attention to what they're doing. If we're not sober minded, we really are not fully understanding what we're doing. We're just living, we think about drunk people and they have no idea what they're doing. Their inhibitions are out the window. They just do whatever they want to, and not really understanding anything what they do. But a sober-minded individual is the exact opposite. They know full well what they're doing. They're taking care of what they're doing, and so this is how we ought to act. And again, that kind of ties in with this idea of being reverent as well, being reverent in behavior. Now, we may look at all this and we see how Christian ought to act. They ought to be sober. They ought to be reverent. And you may be thinking, well, Evan, that sounds like these people are really lame individuals. They're grumpy people. They're just going about life just kind of sulking along, moseying along, being grumpy all the time, kind of dull individuals. But what we have to understand is that seriousness should not be mistaken for meanness, grumpiness, whatever it may be. Okay, so remember 2 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 4. This is Paul writing to this, and he's talking about really all the things that he's suffering. So he's going through tribulation, persecutions, and he says, great is my boldness of speech towards you. Great is my boasting on your behalf. I'm filled with comfort. I'm exceedingly joyful in all of our tribulation. So he's dealing with all of these things, but he says, I'm exceedingly joyful. I'm filled with comfort. And so you get the picture of what Paul is going through and his attitude. And I don't think that this is someone who's just kind of, he's just down in the dumps all the time. Okay. He's not just some sad, lonely individual here. But at the same time, I don't think that he's just having the time of his life. Okay, he's recognizing, really the bad situations that he deals with, but he is going through them in joy and peace. Really, these things are not phasing him like it would a worldly person. Paul writes, I believe it's in Philippians, talking about this peace that surpasses all understanding, and I think a lot of that has to do with how other people see you, that regardless of what's going on in your life, you are dealing with it. You're getting through it, and dealing with it in such a way that it surprises those that are around you. And so we have to understand that we're serious in our walk with the Lord, but again, we can have joy, we can have peace, and all of that, even though it might not just be us, jumping all up and down, happy, as the world may see happiness. So Paul is not having a time of his life during tribulation, but he's certainly joyful. And so this picture that I have, and I have this picture of this guy that's running, and if you were to go and train for a marathon, if you're like me, the first time you try to do a little bit of running, you look like the fellow on the screen, and you may wonder why are you doing it? It is terrible while you're out there running it. But the reason that you start is that you have a goal, that you're working towards it, that that is a credible goal that you can get to. Now, during the run, it may be quite painful, but you still have that mindset on your goal, and that because of that, you're not just, even though you're suffering, you can get through it. You're not just down in the dumps, and you can have some joy and recognizing why you're doing what you're doing. It is at the end of the goal, that end goal, that end point that you're getting to. So even though this guy may right at the moment look like he's not having a good time, he has that goal in mind, and when he crosses that finish line and it's over with, it's definitely going to be a good time then for him. But he's still making those strides, and I would say that even with one dealing with this situation like this runner, he can still maintain a good attitude throughout all of it. So, what is Paul's joy based on? How does he get through all of these things that is not fun for any of us? And I think Hebrews 12, verse 2, kind of gives us an idea. This is talking about Jesus. And it says, looking up to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and to sit down at the right hand of the throne of God. So this is talking about Jesus here, that why did he endure those things? Okay. He endured those things. And it says, why? For the joy that was set before him, that he despised the shame. Of course, we read that there were times when he did not want to go through with this, but it was for that joy that was set before him. And ultimately, at the end of that, he is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. That once this was over with, salvation could be had for the people. That was the goal, but he's also now at the right hand of the throne of God. So again, that end goal. And so we ought to be serious about our walk, or how we interact with others every day, how we worship God, how we interact with God. But also we have to understand that it's not just down in the dump, just a rainy day all day, every day, that we do have joy, and that ultimately our joy is based on things that is not what's going on around us. Okay, that is, our joy is based on our salvation, ultimately as well our end goal. That we can look forward to something else besides what's here on earth. And so that's the end of the lesson here. I hope that it's been useful for anyone who will watch it. As always, if you got a question, feel free to leave that here. And this is, as always, brought to you by the North Columbus Church of Christ. Our website is northcolumbuschristians.com. It's scrolling below me. You can find out more about us there. You can look at some past sermons. And also, there is a gospel meeting in North Columbus Church of Christ starting. That would be Tuesday, April 16th. Okay, Tuesday, April 16th through Saturday. Let me look at the calendar. What would that be? So it'd be Tuesday the 16th through Saturday the 20th. And Tuesday through Friday is at 7 p.m. And I'm going blank on what the time is for Saturday. But you can go to our Facebook page, look through our Facebook page, and you can find out the dates there. But as always, hope this has been useful for you. And I hope that y'all tune in. Hope that you learned something. And Hope that you all have a good day and a good rest of the week. Thanks.